In the year 937, a large English army, led by King Æthelstan, marched north to the Wirral. Here, he led the defence of his kingdom against a deadly coalition of Vikings, Scots and Britons. They had suffered and lost power as Æthelstan expanded his kingdom ever northward. Now, in one of the largest battles of the Anglo-Saxon period, they came together to take down Æthelstan and retake the north from the English. The Battle of Brunanburh is about to begin. This video is sponsored by you. Unfortunately, the YouTube environment is not great right now, with the algorithm being friendlier to drama and react channels and YouTube being permissive of AI slop. We don't do drama and we don't do AI, but thanks to our members and patrons, our channel continues to make 3 public videos per week, with the team intact and going strong. In recognition of their generosity and contributions, members and patrons receive 2 additional exclusive videos each week, and access many other perks. Join them to watch more than 250 exclusive videos covering every era of history. Join them by scanning the QR code on your screen, via the links in the description or pinned comment, or by pressing the join button under the video. It is the summer of 924, and Edward the Elder lies dead at Fountain-on-Dee in the Mercian borderlands. He enjoyed a glorious reign, marked by battlefield victories over the Vikings, military expansion and shrewd diplomacy. But with his death, his efforts to unify the English stood on the brink of ruin. Edward had one shortcoming: his failure to plan for the future. His kingdom was, after all, composed of 2 halves and 2 peoples: the Mercians and the West Saxons. They have been brought together under Edward and his father Alfred, but now, with the throne vacant, separation was spoken of once again, as they each favoured a different candidate for the throne. The Mercians backed Edward's eldest son, Prince Æthelstan. He had grown up in the Midlands and had fought on its front lines against the Vikings. Now aged 30 and a battle-hardened warrior, the Mercian lords saw him as the perfect leader to protect them from the Norse threat. But the bishops and ealdormen of Wessex gathered at Winchester to support an alternative candidate, Edward's second son, Prince Ælfweard. He was younger than his half-brother and less experienced at war, but he had spent his youth in Wessex forming close ties with the power brokers of the south. Moreover, Ælfweard's mother came from one of Wessex's most powerful families. Æthelstan's mother, in contrast, was of lesser status, without ties to any of Wessex's great noble dynasties. Mercia and Wessex now came to a standoff, neither side willing to give way, and it looked like Edward's kingdom would be split in 2. Despite tensions between the brothers, war was avoided. They agreed to hold diplomatic talks, perhaps to discuss a common border, defence against the Vikings, and the governance of East Anglia. But the meeting never took place. On the journey north, Ælfweard stopped at Oxford, where he mysteriously died. How this happened, whether it was natural or unnatural causes that killed him, is unknown. Chroniclers are tight-lipped about the circumstances of his death. But in this moment of uncertainty, the Mercians made a bold move. They formally proclaimed Æthelstan as their new king, a further step to legitimize and consolidate his position. With Ælfweard gone, the West Saxons also decided Æthelstan was now their best candidate, and invited him to rule over them. Finally, the succession crisis was over, and Edward's lands were reunited under a common ruler once again. The following year, on the 4th of September 925, Æthelstan held his coronation at Kingston-upon-Thames. It was a smart choice of location. Kingston-upon-Thames had long been an important royal estate for the House of Wessex, and it was also on the border of Mercia and Wessex. It was in many ways an expression of Æthelstan's heritage, a prince born to Wessex who had spent his youth in Mercia. It was his way of showing he would be king to both peoples equally. With his kingdom secure, Æthelstan now looked beyond his borders. His greatest threat lay north, at York. King Sihtric was the chief Viking leader in the British Isles. He was the head of a great dynasty that ruled an Irish sea empire, with kingdoms at York, Dublin and Man. Æthelstan's first move was to negotiate a peace treaty with York. This was agreed by 926, with Sihtric marrying the English king's sister Edith and accepting the Christian faith. Yet this new peace was short-lived. King Sihtric died in early March 927, leaving his throne vacant. Immediately, the leading men of York summoned Sihtric's cousin, Guthfrithson of Dublin, to take up the throne of York. This would also ensure the York-Dublin axis was maintained. Meanwhile, on York's southern border, an English army was already marching. Before Guthfrith could arrive or the locals could organize their defenses, Æthelstan conquered the town and named himself its master. York's earls, merchants and archbishop had no choice but to kneel before him. Guthfrith was forced to return home empty-handed, and ties between York and Dublin were severed. Æthelstan might have looked toward fortifying the town and consolidating his gains, but his ambitions went beyond York. Within a matter of weeks, he marched further north, to the hilly frontier between York and Strathclyde. At Emont Bridge, 5 kings rode to meet him: Constantine of Scotland, Owain of Strathclyde, Ealdred of Bamburgh, Hywel of West Wales, and Owain of Gwynedd. Æthelstan demanded they all swear an oath of loyalty to him, and none of them were in a position to refuse. Æthelstan's new vassals would be required to refuse cooperation of any form with the Vikings, provide military support when Æthelstan demanded it, pay him annual tribute, and attend his council when summoned. Upon his return south, he travelled to Hereford, where he met with the remaining Welsh kings, and they too surrendered and offered their loyalty. The first 3 years of Æthelstan's reign had been fast-moving and impressive. With good reason was he known by his contemporaries as the Thunderbolt. Already he could claim to be England's first king, and even styled himself as King of all Britain. But he was more than just a very capable warlord. In the more tranquil years that followed 927, he devoted himself to peaceful matters. He produced a vast array of laws, tackling theft and blood feuds, and ensuring that landowners gave alms to the poor. He hosted regular assemblies, attended for the first time by church and secular elites from across England, collected relics, and donated lands and money to his favoured churches. Æthelstan was also a significant figure on the continent. He fostered several young princes from leading European dynasties, many of whom had been exiled from their homes. These included his nephew, Prince Louis of West Francia, Alan of Brittany, and Prince Haakon of Norway. With a mix of diplomacy and military support, during the 930s, Æthelstan restored all 3 young men to rule over their home kingdoms, providing him with close friends and allies across Europe's western seaboard. He forged alliances through marriage with the most powerful rulers in Europe as well. His sister, Eadhild, married Hugh the Great, the senior nobleman in West Francia. Another sister, Eadgith, married Prince Otto of Germany, the future Holy Roman Emperor. And a third sister, Elgifu, married a prince in the Alps. Within just a few years, Æthelstan had expanded his borders. He improved the governance of his subjects, and he developed a network of European allies. But despite an impressive early reign, tensions in the north flared again in 934, and Æthelstan returned to the sword. King Constantine, remembered by the English as the deceitful Old One, had abandoned his pledges to Æthelstan. How he did this, we do not know. He may have refused to attend the king's council. He might have intervened in an English succession dispute at Bamburgh following Lord Ealdred's death. Or, worst of all, he may have plotted to ally himself with the new king of Dublin, Guthfrith's ambitious son, Olaf. Either way, Æthelstan was determined to punish Constantine. How else could he prove his rule over Britain but to punish his vassals when they disobeyed him? He gathered all his forces, English lords, Danish jarls, Welsh princes, and his large fleet too. No English king had brought together so large an army before. They assembled at Nottingham before progressing north to Durham and then finally entered the Scottish kingdom. But Constantine was nowhere to be seen. He had fled to the safety of the Highlands, leaving his people undefended, as the English raided their way through his kingdom. Æthelstan's ships even reached as far as Caithness. Eventually, unwilling to tolerate the destruction of his country any further, Constantine left the mountains. He rode out with a small number of followers and surrendered to Æthelstan, ending the invasion. But the English king decided not to execute him for treason. Instead, Constantine was allowed to keep his life and his crown. He just had to perform the duties he originally promised and prove himself a good and true vassal. At first, it appeared he would finally be true to his word. He joined Æthelstan on his march south and attended a royal council at Buckingham. And again the following year, he returned to attend a royal council at Cirencester, alongside kings from Strathclyde, Gwynedd, Glywysing, Gwent and Deheubarth. It was the greatest royal gathering in Britain since 927, and Æthelstan's ability to compel all of them to attend was another demonstration of the broad reach of his authority. It appears to Æthelstan that he had finally brought Scotland to heel, and after a decades-long rule, he had achieved all his ambitions. But within just a few years, he would face his greatest threat yet. Upon returning north, Constantine resumed his plotting. He sent secret envoys to Dublin and Strathclyde, and the three kings together hatched a plot to take down Æthelstan. The Scots and Viking Dublin may have been natural rivals, with different religious faiths, but they had both suffered at Æthelstan's hands, and both been defeated when they previously took him on alone. Working together, they would prove a more formidable opponent. This was Olaf's best chance of winning back York, and Constantine's best chance to regain independent rule. By the summer of 937, they turned their plan into action. The northern kings marched south along the west coast, while Olaf crossed the Irish Sea. Not only did he command the men of Dublin, but sea kings, pirate earls, and bands of raiders across the Irish Sea and the Scottish Isles joined him, eager for plunder and glory that a war with the English might offer. The meeting point for these vast and diverse armies was the Wirral. Their plan was to bring Æthelstan to battle, defeat him, and end his hold over the north. They began by raiding nearby settlements to draw the king into conflict. To the south, messengers scuttled to the royal court to inform their master of the invasion. Æthelstan was shocked. He thought the Scots had been dealt with twice, and the Vikings had been unheard of in England for a decade. Now his two greatest enemies had united in a common cause. Æthelstan swiftly marched to Mercia's northwest frontier, not too far from where his father had died all those years ago. Passing Chester and reaching the Wirral, Æthelstan soon realized a third shock. He was hugely outnumbered. According to the 13th century Eagle's Saga, Æthelstan employed several strategies to conceal his numbers and delay the battle, at least until reinforcements arrived. When setting up his battle camp, he ordered dozens more tents built than were needed, so Viking scouts wouldn't notice his small numbers. He also sent peace envoys to Olaf, offering payments of silver in exchange for abandoning his allies and agreeing to peace. Such was the size of the payment that Olaf seriously considered the offer. After a lengthy discussion with his war chiefs, he sent the envoys back with a counteroffer, asking for more silver. This began a back and forth between the two camps, as envoys earnestly haggled for the best deal for their masters. Yet the long, drawn-out negotiations lasted over a week, and still nothing was settled. This had allowed Æthelstan time to build his numbers, so that he finally achieved equal strength to the invaders. Now he offered the only true terms under which he would accept peace. Olaf would have to leave England, pay compensation for any damages caused by his raiding, and submit himself to Æthelstan's overlordship. Olaf now realized Æthelstan's deception, and that he had lost a week of opportunity when he could have fought with more favorable odds. Finally, he decided that tomorrow at dawn they would fight at last. On a crisp autumn morning, the two sides approached the battlefield near the town of Brunanburh, modern-day Bromburgh. It was the ultimate clash to decide who held the north. From the Highland chieftains to pirates of the Irish Sea and English lords in the south, this battle brought together warriors from all across Britain. We have no knowledge of the size of the armies, but the battle was remembered as one of the largest clashes in 10th century Britain. Each side perhaps numbered between 5,000 and 10,000. The vast field of combat was hemmed in by natural boundaries. A small stream flowed to the left and to the right. The ground rose toward a dense, dark forest. Æthelstan split his army into two. He took control of half the forces to the left, made up of Mercians, staring down Olaf's men. His brother, Prince Edmund, commanded the right side, composed of West Saxons preparing to take on the Scots. The invaders moved first. Olaf and Constantine gave the order to advance, as their men locked together their shields to form a formidable wall of wood and steel. The English likewise followed suit and strode forth, pitting one shield wall against another. Before the clash, there was a flurry of missiles fired. Arrows, spears, and even rocks were launched between each side. Then came the smashing together of the shields as the front line collided, and the shoving match between the front lines commenced. While spearmen jabbed and stabbed at gaps in the wall, axemen struck down at opposing shield-bearers. The two sides were so well matched that the fighting raged from early morning until the sun began to sink in the evening, with bodies mounting as the death toll reached the hundreds. As a contemporary poet recorded, There many men lay slain by spears, and northern warriors, shot down despite their shields, and Scotsmen too, weary with battle sated. Eventually, under immense pressure, Olaf's shield wall began to crack. Æthelstan's army poured through the breaches, and as the poet tells us, the Mercians refused hard battle play to none among the fighters who came with Olaf over rolling seas, bringing invasion to this land by ship, destined to die in battle. But the fighting was deadly at the breach, and two of the king's cousins, Ælfwine and Æthelwine, were cut down and killed. But slowly the Viking host weakened and was torn apart, and most of its commanders were killed in the onslaught. 5 young kings lay dead upon the battlefield, by swords sent to their final sleep, and likewise 7 of Olaf's earls. The Scots and Britons, seeing the disintegration of their Norse allies, realized the fight was lost. They now fled and were chased and hacked down by the West Saxons. What little remained of Olaf's following also gave up and raced to the safety of their ships. The poet records the humiliating flight of Olaf and Constantine. There the Norseman's chief was put to flight and driven by dire need with a small retinue to seek his ship. The ship pressed out to sea. The king departed. Over the deep sea back they went to Dublin. To Ireland they returned with shameful hearts. Likewise the wise old Constantine came, the veteran, to his northern native land by flight. He had no reason to exult in that encounter, for he lost there friends, and was deprived of kinsmen in the strife upon that battlefield, and left his son destroyed by wounds on that grim place of slaughter. By the end of the day, Æthelstan and young Edmund held the field, and won the English kingdom's first great battle. The battle was best remembered for its scale and bloodiness. A contemporary Irish monk reported, "A great, lamentable and horrible battle was cruelly fought between the Saxons and the Norsemen, in which several thousands of Norsemen, who are uncounted, fell, but their king Olaf escaped with a few followers. A large number of Saxons fell on the other side, but Æthelstan, king of the Saxons, enjoyed a great victory." While for the English, a generation later, it was simply known amongst the common people as the Great Battle. For now, England was secure. The triple alliance of northern powers was shattered, and York would remain under Wessex's control. Yet Scotland and Strathclyde, while beaten back north, were not entirely defeated. The English forces were so devastated that a third campaign north could not be contemplated for the rest of Æthelstan's reign. The northern kingdoms thereby won back independent rule. After Brunanburh, Æthelstan returned to his more comfortable southern homeland. He would remain unchallenged for the rest of his life, but he would not live for much longer. By 939, Æthelstan had fallen ill at Gloucester. Only 45 years old, the king had seen 15 years of rule take its toll. And on the 27th of October 939, King Æthelstan died. England now faced an uncertain future. The king had no sons, but his brother, Edmund, was quickly accepted as his successor by the Royal Council of Lords and Bishops at Winchester. But the north, the lands once ruled by Vikings, were less trustworthy subjects. Their loyalty to Æthelstan was extracted at sword point. They feared his vengeance and respected his prowess as a warlord. There was no guarantee that the ambitions held in check by his kingship would continue under Edmund. The question of the north remained the most pressing issue in Britain for another generation, and tensions would soon arise again, as Wessex and Dublin both lay claim to York. Join us next time when we discuss the aftermath of Brunanburh and how Æthelstan's successors handled the Vikings and consolidated West Saxon power in the north. If you do not want to miss that and many other historical videos, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 300 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.